hey, you found yourself to the week Unspun, a weekly live look at the news of the world from the thoughtful and attentive gaze of three PR professionals and our live audience. So glad you found your way to our little show. I'm David Gallagher, dialing in from London.
I'm Doug Downs in Western Canada.
And what the world wants to know is where in the world is Farzana Bajwell?
I am in this jewel of an island called Sri Lanka, which is south of India, and it is just absolutely heavenly.
You got to tell us a little bit what you're doing there. We know what you're doing there, but tell us a little bit what you're doing there.
So I joined the board of this incredible organization called Halo Trust, and they're a demining organization, the largest humanitarian demining organization in the world. And they're in about 32 countries and territories. And I joined their board. And so the first thing they said is, you can't just sit there filtering board papers. You have to understand the nature and go into the field. So I chose Sri Lanka because I've always loved Sri Lanka as a country, and I've been traveling here for many, many years. So I arrived in Colombo, the capital, and then I took a car 8 hours right to the north. They've just had Cyclone Ditwa, so there's been landslides and some flooding in some parts of the island, but not all. So I went to go and see minefields, and it was absolutely incredible. And the US government actually are a really big supporter of Halo Trust's work in Sri Lanka, and they give these huge amphibious sort of extractors that go into the coast and these lagoons and extract mines, because they had I think a 27-year conflict, civil war they had between the Sri Lankan army and the LTTE, commonly known as Tamil Tigers, but it's left with huge amounts of unexploded ordnance and mines that the Halo Trust since 1992 have been clearing up. They've already done over 1 million remnants of war, including 300,000 mines.
Wow. If you don't follow Farzana on Instagram, go to her channel on Instagram and have a look at some of the photos and videos that she's uploaded. It's such a beautiful area.
Yeah, and what important work from the Halo Trust. So thank you for being part of that. And we'll look. We could do a whole show on just the Halo Trust. We were just talking about that. Actually, on today's show, as usual, we've been scouring the headlines. The headlines have found their way to us, kind of looking for what we think is interesting from a PR perspective. We're just three people. We know in our live audience and those that maybe are participating on this later in the day or over the weekend, please drop in some comments. You're going to have views and perspectives that maybe wouldn't have occurred to us. And I think that just enriches everybody's experience. So over the last 48 hours, we've been texting furiously on deciding where we thought this conversation should go. And who knows, maybe there'll be something that breaks in the middle of the conversation. But here's where we're headed right now. Doug has been following what I've called the Great Battle of Hollywood. This is the bid to take over Warner Brothers. Really, since our last show, I think you said this is something we should be following. So I think we're going to spend a little bit of time with that. Believe it or not, Farzana's got other things going on besides clearing landmines from the world's conflict zones. She's going to talk about a UK government project to future-proof the British law industry, and I think that's got implications both for British law, but also for what we do in the comms marketing PR space. And I still haven't decided what I'm going to talk about. So I got a couple of little things I'm going to mention, but I have asked 6 really bright people to tell me what they think is going to happen in 2026 in the world of PR. So we'll have a lot to get through, but I think we got to go we got to go to Hollywood, Doug. So
shouldn't I be there for this? How come Farzana gets to go to Sri Lanka for her report? I don't get to go to Hollywood. Okay. Netflix wants to buy Warner Brothers. If this happens, Netflix would control HBO Studios, DC Studios, Warner Brothers Pictures, and Warner Brothers Games. Look at all these brands that Netflix would control. It's one of the biggest deals Hollywood has ever seen, and it could reshape the entire industry. One company would hold many of the stories that shape the way you and I think, feel, and talk about the world. Paramount has jumped in now with a larger hostile bid. Now the fight is out in the open. Shareholders are split. Regulators are watching closely. Politicians are weighing in, of course, from both sides, of course. And the reaction inside Hollywood is sharp. Some fear Netflix would push everything toward tighter budgets and data-driven stories. Others fear Paramount would break up parts of the studio and cut deep. Creators feel the whole landscape is changing. Look at that. A major part of the story here is control. Warner Brothers holds some of the most valuable worlds ever made. Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, DC Heroes, major animation libraries, and a deep bank of documentary and news archives. These are not just brands. They are cultural landmarks. Whomever owns them decides how they grow, change, or fade. There's also a quiet worry running through the creative world. Warner has always licensed its material broadly. Filmmakers, podcasters, journalists, independent creators have long used Warner archives, footage, and historical audio in their work. Netflix doesn't license things that way. It keeps things tight to the chest. If Netflix wins, access to that history may narrow. That means fewer chances for creators to build stories from old material and less room for the public to see familiar worlds through fresh voices. This deal is also a test of public relations, each side fighting to shape the narrative. Netflix speaks about steady ownership and leadership. Paramount speaks about protecting the studio's soul. Workers talk about jobs, fans talk about culture, unions talk about power. Every message is a move in a larger struggle over who should guide a major piece of our shared imagination. In the end, the winner will not just buy a company, they will shape how future stories are told, who gets to tell them, and what the public believes those stories should mean. That's why this deal feels bigger than business. It reaches into culture itself. It decides not only who owns the past, but who gets to create the future.
Huge story, and I'm glad you you kind of brought at least my attention to it. When you first mentioned it, I was thinking of it as sort of another corporate merger deal, and there'd be the usual sort of, is this a monopoly? Is it not? Is it good for consumers? Is it not? But when you zoom out like that, it really is a big story. I mentioned I was at a holiday party yesterday with some studio execs. And pretty highly
Which you
placed
do.
studios.
This is just a typical. That's what you do.
It's just how I like to
That's how
hang
you
out
roll.
on a Thursday night. But one of them said, this is, after a few glasses of Prosecco, said he thought this would be the end of cinema. If Netflix takes over Warner Brothers, that it will destroy an already fragile economic reality for the cinematic industry. And I just hadn't thought of it that way. So that's just one part of the one part of the conversation. There are also some big news brands that are affected in this deal, CNN and CBS. So closer out of the bigger storytelling complex, but in the news media, there's some big news brands affected with this. So I do think it's a significant story.
Gosh, I mean, I think as Doug said, one has to be very mindful that the business of storytelling is really the business of influence. And you have news, social media platforms with their algorithms, and be it cinema storytelling, be it sort of Netflix, that have film and sort of TV series. It shapes people, it shapes culture, and so it'll be really interesting to know who's going to buy it, and also there's a consortium put in place behind it. Who does that comprise of? Are they foreign players involved as well? How will that then end up becoming a sort of foreign policy soft power play? So I think wait and see. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think from a PR perspective, they've got a multitude of stakeholders that they need to reassure with very different messaging. So the talent would require a different sort of messaging in terms of reassurance of jobs. The customers, the diehard film sort of people, and of course the regulators. I mean, how do you think the regulators will look at it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's good arguments, I guess, either way, from whether this is a monopoly or not. Or so I've been told. President Trump says he will be involved in the decision, so that makes it a political question already. There are reasons for Paramount maybe to believe that they've got a good relationship with the Trump administration that Netflix may not. The fact that there is this coalition of non-American investors backing the Paramount counterbid.
This is the Guardian story you're referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you can spin us out from there, Doug. Louise Watson in London is asking about a difference in valuation. I read something about that. I don't know enough about it to comment.
I do a little on the numbers. It's evaluated at 72 billion, but the original bid, I believe, is 82 billion, which that's normal. You always up bid. And then I think the Paramount hostile bid is up as high as 108 billion. So the numbers are flying all over the place.
Right.
Right. But that story in The Guardian was that the Paramount bid is backed in large part by a group from, I think it's Saudi Arabia, and that's brand new. And I don't see it. I'm over here on this side of the pond. I don't see that in any of my news feeds yet. I know it's in The Guardian, but it doesn't pop up in my aggregated news feed. So that hasn't splashed.
Yeah, it's a fund, I believe, that is backed by sovereign money from the Gulf states and from Jared Kushner, president's son-in-law. So it's a really this would be a great Netflix story by itself.
How that story gets told depends on who buys.
Well, I think this is probably going to come up because this story isn't going to go away anytime soon. It's on a timeline that's not finite, but won't be resolved probably anytime immediately. Maybe, Farzana, bring us back to some other work you're doing with the UK government and some work to promote the legal profession. I didn't know they needed help with promoting themselves, but apparently they do.
Everybody needs help. Everybody needs help. Even the PRs need PR. Now, the English Law Promotion Panel was set up and they held their first meeting, and very honored to join the panel. It was myself, another PR person, and the rest were lawyers who I've always had the greatest respect for lawyers, because I think they actually are on the similar spectrum to us PRs. It's a spectrum of advocacy, but their advocacy is within the constraints of legal jurisdictions, whereas PRs, we swim out in the wild ocean with no sort of parameters and no regulation, which Doug and I have a issue on. Now, a little bit about the English Law Promotion Panel. It's been formed as part of the UK's modern industrial strategy, which will drive economic growth, apparently. It will focus on how to reinforce the English law status as a leading choice for international business, future-proofing the UK legal services sector amid competition from other countries. And this is and the panel is chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister and Lord Chancellor David Lammy. Here he is. And this is what he had to say. He said, the UK's legal services sector is a hidden superpower of our economy, generating more than £42.6 billion a year and employing more than £364 people across the country. And I must say, lawyers get paid a great deal more than us PRs. The use of English law by international business is key to that success story, and we want to stay ahead of the game. And then he goes on to say that he's bringing together legal and business leaders to make sure the UK remains a jurisdiction of choice and continues to champion the rule of law around the world. Now, we all know that actually the UK is facing some stiff competition from Singapore and also Dubai as well. And so now, Doug, I wanted to bring you in to give us a bit of context for Americans who don't perhaps understand, the concept of sort of like a national law, like English law, because of course there is no such thing as American law, but you do have New York law, Delaware law. So, please share.
Yeah, and I had to research this. I was trying to wrap my head around the story. I'm so happy for you being on this board, Farzana. This is fantastic. I just wanted to get that in. When we talk about international business, this is for international deals, and you have to decide on what's the rule of law. Kind of like if you're going to play poker, you got to decide what are the rules, right? You need to decide on which law is going to apply to the contract or contracts that you're signing. So when we talk about international businesses choosing English law, important to correct a common misconception. There is no single body of American law competing with it. In the US, companies choose amongst state laws. New York law, for example, is big and perhaps the leader for finance. California law for tech deals, or for corporate, Delaware for corporate governance. And globally, businesses also sometimes opt for German law, which is often done for engineering or industrial mergers. And French law is widely used in civil markets and in a surprising number of Peugeot-related disputes for reasons only French drivers can fully understand. But the real competitive pressure now is, as Farzana mentions, the rise of Singapore law. Singapore is not waiting for the world to come to it. It's actively marketing its legal system as the modern neutral choice for international commerce. They're building institutions, promoting themselves abroad, and positioning Singapore law as the natural jurisdiction for deals touching Asia, which is growing a lot. And that's why this move from the UK government matters. This new English Law Promotion Panel is IMO, fundamentally a reputation strategy, a branding exercise, not aimed necessarily at British citizens, but at multinational companies, global investors, and cross-border deal makers. The message they want to send is choosing English law adds stability, predictability, and credibility to your deal, and is a way of staying on the gold standard.
Well,
David?
I think what's quite interesting is, the UK government, they are beginning to really get soft power and understand strategic communications and reputation. And of course, this is just one example. So before, they set up a soft power council, and there's a few friends of mine who are on the council who I've got huge respect for. So they've really brought in the right sort of people. So I think long may that continue, because, having an industrial strategy is one thing, but actually to really bring it into reality, you need promotion, you need to go out there, you need messaging, you need
and so
strategic comms.
That leads me to this. There's only one Farzana Bajwal on the board. The rest are kind of lawyers. And oh, I mean, bravo. They started with the best. They started with the way to go.
I think that there's
Don't let those lawyers
there's,
overtalk you, Farzana.
there is another comms person, but yes, we are in the minority, and there's a lot more lawyers. But again, I pretty much love lawyers. So I'm not complaining, but I do love PRs more. So I would like more PRs on a promotion panel. So I agree, David. I wanted to bring you in with your thoughts.
Well, I love that you're on this board as well, and maybe we'll focus more time on a future show. But really, I like the fact that they are including a comms perspective. That says something. We do have a seat at the table, and we have an important perspective to add. Swinging the light around and looking at PR, our comms or marketing or media, I would love to see the government focus a similar amount of energy on promoting the UK creative industry. I think they do in some areas. I didn't get a chance to look at this before the show, but I think they promote the fashion industry and a few others. But I was on a panel for the UK PRCA years ago, trying to promote the UK PR scene as the go-to hub for international public relations, because of the time zone, which is friendly to most parts of the world, because of English language as the language of business, and in many respects the language of media. And because of the collection of talent here. So it would be interesting to kind of learn what we can from the lawyers and see what we can apply elsewhere. Now, every time I say this, I get notes on LinkedIn from people in New York who say I'm crazy to say that London is the capital, or I get people from the north of England saying that I'm too London focused. So anyway, I'm just glad we're having this. I'm glad we're having the conversation.
Can I just ask you, David, where do you think the center of excellence is for PR?
I think it depends. How's that for
you are so diplomatic.
In the mind.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what I love about London, though. It's the center of the financial services sector, at least for a big part of the world. It's the center for a big part of the English media landscape, including entertainment, and it's the center of the UK government, and a big part of the world that still looks to the UK. So I think a lot of things happen here in London, whereas in the US, the centers of excellence are a little more distributed, on the West Coast for entertainment, and New York for finance, and DC for public affairs. But I do think globally, in my experience, clients are more comfortable with UK-based agencies for that work than American. And I'm preparing myself for the backlash now that I will inevitably do. So I'm just going to exercise my prerogative. I got to write the show notes today, so I got to decide where we were going with the stories. It'll be somebody else's prerogative next time. I couldn't land on a specific story, but I just want to touch really quickly on 4. If you guys have comments, please stop me. If anybody in the audience has comments, and then I want to get to some predictions. So Solomon, if you don't mind, just kind of bringing up my first slide, and I'll start talking anyway. I think the 4 things that grabbed my attention this week. First, the U.S. State Department reversed an earlier decision promoting Calibri as the font of choice, and re-promoting Times New Roman because it's less woke. And I guess the original benefit of Calibri is that it was considered to be more readable and more inclusive. So
so it's a return to what Americans have seen habitually anyway. The original move was to be, for whatever reason, to switch to Calibri.
Yep.
And now it's just returned to how it was. They've decided that's their type.
Yeah, exactly. Just, unrelated to this, one time Farzana introduced me to a professional type designer, and I didn't know that such a thing existed. Obviously, it must, because there's a lot of different type fonts out there, and I found it to be a really fascinating topic. Again, topic for another day. I thought that the U.S. reversal of a decision not to sell NVIDIA AI chips to China, but now saying they would, so long as the U.S. retains its 25% ownership of any deals that go through that, which is a weird story by itself. I think that's interesting, but I don't know the PR angle. Maybe one of our listeners does, and we'll chime in. So I'll just park that there. I think an obvious big story with obvious PR implications, and again, probably not enough time to get to, is the Australia ban on social media for
Huge.
kids under the age of 16. What I've been able to read is that most of the coverage about it has been how kids have outsmarted the system and found their way back onto the platforms anyway. But I think there will be a lot of things and to learn from that experiment, and maybe it'll be a conversation that comes up.
Are they just getting adults to sign in for them, like hanging outside of the beer store? Hey, buddy, can you buy me a six-pack kind of deal?
It does have a lot of comic potential, but I get the sentiment behind the move. And then in the middle of the week, what I think does have very obvious PR implications for the U.S. tourism hospitality industry is a pretty dramatic upgrade in entry requirements for, I think, 42 countries where a visa wasn't required for tourists and visitors to visit the U.S. Now a much bigger, more potentially onerous set of requirements, including sharing your social media from the last 5 years, names and contact information for family and employers. It's a pretty burdensome proposal. It's not yet in effect. Although I do know the U.S. Embassy here in London has already issued guidance saying foreign visitors need to set their social media to public. I don't know what the real implications of that are, but it doesn't, in my view, sit well with potential.
But this is if you're staying for 6 months or something, right? That this isn't, hey, I'm heading down to Disneyland with the kids for a week and we're gonna have some fun. That it doesn't apply in that case.
I don't know. That sounds like you read more into that than I have. But
it's if you're staying for a while. They want.
Okay.
They're just saying we want to know a little more about you.
Yeah. Okay.
David, can I ask just quickly on that? I just think to myself, is it going to start harming the interests of these big tech social media platforms? Because people are going to start thinking, do you know what? It's enjoyable. You're getting messaging coming in from Australia that is harmful for, so harmful that they have banned it for sort of, under 16s. That's going to start that whole narrative up about, the harms in terms of mental health, attention deficit and so forth. But then you've got also then if you start traveling to the US, you may end up having to, get called out for any sort of social media posts that you did. So is it going to become this sort of hindrance that we're going to start thinking, God, is it worth it?
I don't think anything that's happening in the US government is against the interest of big tech platforms right now. So is that a potential development? Maybe. But I think right now, anything that's happening is probably with the blessing, if not the actual encouragement of big tech. I wonder if someone's going to come up with an app that helps you kind of scrape or bypass or somehow aggregate your data in a way that's administration friendly, but we shall see. I want to, and I know you guys told me we probably wouldn't have enough time for this, but I'm going to try to race through a few predictions, and I'm not going to give any of these justice, and I apologize for that in advance. But 6 really bright people bothered to write and say, here's what they thought might happen in the world of PR in 2026. So, Solomon, if you don't mind moving us to crisis communication, Phil Borman, a good friend and colleague based in Lisbon, says that crisis communication will shift from a nice to have to a must have as a legal requirement. He's talking specifically about new legal requirements in the EU and the US as they relate to cybersecurity incidents. You really got to follow his newsletter, Wag the Dog. He goes into this and a lot of other related issues in a great level of detail. I think that's not a prediction; it's a statement. But I'm glad that he made it and brought our attention.
And hopefully they'll choose English law.
And hopefully they'll choose English law to resolve their disputes. Lou Watson, who kindly commented earlier, I guess he's watching today. Big expert on misinformation. She works with a lot of security-related interests. She says that the enemies of the truth, whether are fairness or of certain states, will find it hard to hide under the shadows. She's not saying that misinformation will go away, but in 2026, we'll see greater visibility from both private and public sector entities to kind of showcase where misinformation is coming from and what its what its nature is. So I asked her, she was optimistic. She's a little more guarded than that. But she too is worth following on LinkedIn for people who are interested in misinformation. Thank you, Louise, for that prediction. If we don't mind going to the next one, authenticity. Rachel Gilley runs a great agency called Clarity, global agency. She says that brand authenticity will be more crucial than ever, especially as AI starts churning out slop, my word, not hers. So she is at the top of a great advisory chain of command at Clarity, and that's the kind of advice she's giving to her agencies. Thank you, Rachel. My friend, and now I think Doug's had some chance to work with Matt Collette, big thinker, big clear thinker as it relates to generative AI. And he says that he's based in Vancouver. Maybe that's why you guys have a nice affinity. He says that comms teams will experience more change from generative AI in 2026 than they have in the past 3 years. And that's probably got some people, already a little bit anxious. You should probably talk to Matt if that's the case, because he's here to help. But he thinks we're just now getting into the weeds of this, and I believe that's true. Joe Harrod runs a market research and public information, a public opinion research business based here in London. He touches on a topic that we've looked at before, and that's the BBC and trust. I'm condensing a pretty thoughtful post from him, but he says that the BBC will be attacked over and over on everything that they do for the next year, from Christmas to the Glastonbury concert lineup, and yet they will remain the most trusted news and information source in the world. So the storm won't stop, but the trust will abide. So hope you're right on that, Joe. Miranda, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, sent me a nice note last night. She runs an agency called Pray Tell here in London. She says that blogs are back in town, partly because, or mainly because, that's what AI likes to find. And so that we're starting to see her clients are starting to ask for that type of content. It plays through not just in blogs, and Doug, you'll appreciate this from a podcast, videocast point of view. Their agency calls this part of the remix era, where authentic owned content starts getting remixed in different ways to find audiences on its own, but also to influence the algorithm. So thank you, Miranda. And then last one from Jane Kodos in Washington. She actually sent me a lovely produced video from her car. That seems to be a thing. I guess you get better audio control, where she gave me a series of thoughtful predictions. I just chose one. Jane, I don't know if this is the one you wanted me to focus on, but I thought it was interesting. And it goes back to authenticity and transparency. And she's like, in 2026, you're hiding the use of AI is going to become a liability. And in fact, it'll be an asset if you say, yeah, I used AI to help me with this. I use all the tools available to me. And so that might be a way for us to all find a little bit more comfort with using AI in the workplace. So thank you, Jane, for that. I realize we're 2 minutes out. I did get through all 6. We might do a few more of these before we run out of December, but thanks everybody for contributing. And I thought that was a good conversation. So thanks, guys.
That's excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much for spending a bit of your day with us. Farzana, how hot is it down near the equator?
Do you know what? It's not too bad. I mean, it is monsoon season, and Sri Lanka is quite extraordinary because they've got different microclimates in the north compared to the south. And so it's monsoon season in the north, but not in the south. And so it's different. And I've been going all over the island. And so the weather's been a bit schizophrenic. But of course, it's, it was quite a tragedy what happened with Cyclone Ditwa. And so, and in particular, because it's always been happening in this part of the world, but the frequency of natural disasters seems to be speeding up, and that seems to be a big issue for countries such as Sri Lanka.
You're down near the equator today, and in a couple of weeks, you're joining me here in Canada's Rocky Mountains in January. So bring a light sweater, Farzana. You'll need to bundle up just a little bit. Thank you for spending a bit of your day with us this Friday. As always, thanks to superstar producers Emily Page and Solomon Ibe. The Week Unspun is a co-production of Fullgate Advisors, Kurz and Public Relations, and Stories and Strategies podcasts. Hey, the recordings are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. You can give them a listen there. And one final thought today. Remember that everyone you talk to today is tender somewhere, including you. Choose compassion over criticism and create that emotional safety that is the birthplace of real connection. Have a great Friday. Have a fantastic weekend.